Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I gotta tell you how much I appreciate you listening, and I love reading your reviews and any comments you make on social media, Instagram, Threads, Facebook at Kristen D. Boyce, or TikTok, Kristen Boyce. I love seeing just what you post and when you share the episode. So thank you so much. If you haven't grabbed your free journal, do that right now at Kristen, KRISTEN, Boyce, BOICE.com/free resources, and it will be emailed to your inbox. I'm excited about this week's guest because we have a lot in common. We are both trained in Brené Brown. I got trained way back in the day before she got on Oprah, and we talked a little bit about our training together, and she's a fellow therapist in Ohio. So I am excited to share our conversation about high-functioning anxiety. It's a topic we don't talk about too much. Let me introduce you to my guest. Nancy Jane Smith is a licensed professional counselor and a high-functioning anxiety expert. She has studied anxiety, inner critic, overfunctioning as a way of coping for the past 20 years. She also lived the high-functioning anxiety her whole life. She is an author, podcaster, speaker, teacher, blogger, wife, animal lover, daughter, sister, and friend. She is fascinated with psychology and the act of self-loyalty and decreasing your suffering. She says she's no longer on social media, not surprisingly, because she says it's largely because of anxiety. I'm like, good for her. We talked a little bit about that, and it's just impressive. I mean, we talk about how our bodies absorb our stress and our anxiety and how that's impacted her life, how she has continuously worked on herself to move through it, and what exactly is high-functioning anxiety, and do you have it or not? So we're going to talk about all of that and so much more. So without further ado, here is my wonderful conversation with Nancy. I hope you enjoy it and get a lot out of it that can be applicable to working through your anxiety. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so happy you are here with us this week. I know you have such limited time on what you want to listen to, read, pay attention to. So I'm so thankful you are here with us today for this important episode. We're going to be talking about high-functioning anxiety. What is it? How do we work through it? And all the ins and outs of understanding yourself. So if this might be something that piqued your curiosity, I highly recommend you stay tuned and then share this with a friend or a family member or a coworker, someone that you think might benefit from understanding what is high-functioning anxiety. We're going to kind of weave in transitions as we talk about high-functioning anxiety. But without further ado, I want to welcome my guest, Nancy Jane Smith. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am so glad you're here. We just kind of clicked right out of the gate. We're both Brené Brown trained, and we were talking about our training and how that went. And I was telling Nancy that on her website, there is a blurb that I love. She doesn't know what I'm going to read yet. So I'm going to read the blurb, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about Nancy's story and how she got into really focusing on high-functioning anxiety. So here's what she wrote that I think will resonate with you as the audience. Why am I so passionate about high-functioning anxiety? For much of my adult life, I lived a double life. At work and with friends, I was very social, happy, professional, and lighthearted. But as soon as the doors to my house closed, I was alone. I was consumed with self-doubt. How many of you are already saying, yes, I resonate with this? I had an internal commentaries constantly telling me how I could improve myself, what I was doing wrong, and how the outside world would find out if I wasn't careful. I always felt like even the privacy of my own home, cameras were watching me, and everyone would find out that I was lazy, antisocial, and obsessive thinking freak. The challenge of this internal commentary was that underlying message was if I were a better person, this just gets me because I can so resonate with this. If I was a better person, if I tried harder or somehow cracked the code, I wouldn't be so miserable. Perfection was in my reach. I just needed to push harder. What do you feel when I read that out loud now as you're hearing it back?
Yeah. What is funny is it's very relatable today. We're recording this on a Monday, and my husband and I have what we call Mondays, Monger Mondays, which monger you'll hear is my word for the inner critic. Because my inner critic, that monger, comes out so hard on Mondays because this is the day I'm supposed to hit it hard and do all the things and be perfect, because I've held myself, anything that's come into my brain that I should be doing, I'm like, I'll wait till Monday. Well, now it's Monday. And so I can get very overwhelmed on Mondays with that. So I have to do my own work, even years of studying this stuff.
Yes, I so relate to that. And then the Sundays is kind of like the dread of the Monday and the dread of the week. What do they call that? What did we call
The Sunday
that?
scaries.
The Sunday scaries. Do you get that?
I don't get the Sunday scaries because I put it all off till Monday.
That makes sense. So you're like, that's why the Monday feels like it does.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me about your journey into really unpacking, unfolding, and diving into high-functioning anxiety. And then we'll talk about what is high-functioning anxiety exactly.
It's really been an interesting journey. It started back in 2017, and my dad died. And I had taken care of him. He had Parkinson's with dementia. We were very close. He was like my biggest fan. Literally, I just loved him to death. But the one thing was he had this inner critic that he was 78 when he died, and he still felt like he was a failure, even though he had successful kids and he built his own business and he had this wonderful house and this beautiful wife and 50 years of marriage. But he still had the things. His monger, that inner critic, was still running the show. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. And around that same time, I had been teaching about the monger, about inner critic and how to deal with it. And everyone says, and this does go into high functioning anxiety, because I'll shortcut it and then I'll go back out. People with high functioning anxiety have very loud mongers. They have an inner critic that is like a demon who is driving their every whim and feeding that line of, if you could do it perfectly, everything will be okay. And so I went on this mission to figure out, how do I quiet this monger voice? And everything out there was about love yourself no matter what and have self-compassion. And I just had no freaking clue what that even meant. How am I supposed to love myself when I have so much stuff I want to do and I need to be better? And my whole life I've heard how I need to be better. And so how do I reconcile that? I came up with these three characters, and one is the monger, which is the inner critic. And then the second is the BFF, which is my version, was my version of self-compassion. And the BFF is like, do whatever you want. So I've cracked myself down so hard with the monger all week long, telling me, work harder, go faster, or even if I could crack it down till 5 o'clock at night. And then it was, let's have some wine. Let's bring in the BFF. So then it's 3 glasses of wine and a chocolate cake and potato chips late at night, because my things tend to be alcohol and food related. Or it would be procrastination that my BFF would tell me, don't worry about that. That's why I can push it off till Mondays, because my BFF comes in Sunday night to tell me not to worry about it. So that was my version of self-compassion. So it just wasn't really working. And so I realized there's this middle ground, and it's this biggest fan voice. And so the biggest fan voice is the voice of, I call it the voice of self-loyalty. And I like the word self-loyalty because my clients and myself were great at being loyal to others. So we know what that means, because our monger tells us if we're loyal to other people, then we'll be better people ourselves and we'll finally quit feeling crappy about ourselves. But we don't know how to be loyal to ourselves, to have our own backs, to really be there no matter what, even when it's hard. And so I went out and I did a book tour. I wrote a book called The Happier Approach that talks about these 3 characters and what to do with them, which we'll get into. And then I went on a book tour and I realized, okay, everyone has an inner critic, but some people really have this inner critic. And around that same time, I was reading the book, First We Make the Beast Beautiful by Sarah. I will get that name, but it's First We Make the Beast Beautiful. And it's a beautiful book on anxiety and bipolar. And it's a memoir. And it's, people love it or hate it, I've found. And if you have anxiety, you will love it, is my guess, because she's kind of jumps all over the board like an anxious brain does. And so if you have anxiety, it's really keeps you hopping because she's moving all over the brain. But she described anxiety the way I experienced anxiety, which was push, push, push. I don't run and hide. I don't worry to myself so I don't go. I worry and then I push myself to go harder and faster and better. So that is when it was like, oh, this is something that's a big deal to me. I could never relate to anxiety the way people would describe it, but I could relate to this idea of I feel like there's something chasing me and I got to outrun it based on my performance. And so let me go.
So your dad's death in 2017 really cracked open these three parts, if you will, the monger, the BFF,
Yes.
and the biggest fan.
Yes, exactly. Because it finally allowed me to admit, you're living a lie, Nancy. You are telling people, here's how you deal with your monger. You have self-compassion. If you go onto my website, you can pull up writings that I wrote in 2015 and 2016 that are telling people have self-compassion, even though I wasn't. And it wasn't until I did a presentation with a group of friends of mine and the friends about mongers, and the friends said, great, that was a great presentation. You totally described me, but I'm not doing anything about this because I need that voice or I won't get anything done.
Yes, because I don't want to give that up.
Right. And so
That'll enable me to not do anything.
Exactly. I will just be a mess on the couch if I give that voice up. And I was like, and I laughed with her like, ha, ha, ha. But then I was like, totally, girl, I'm with you 100%. I 100% agree with you. And then my dad died. And then I was like, I need to find a different way to do this because this living a lie isn't working. And so that kind of spurred it all up to the forefront.
Do you think the grief wouldn't let you do that anymore? Because I think that's grief. Because I lost my mom in October. And I'm like, the grief won't let you do. It won't let you do the performance thing because you don't have it to do. You don't have to offer.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I will just say, so sorry about your mom. Losing a parent is just rocks your world. I mean, that's a trite thing to say, but it is so freaking true that it just takes your heart and throws it on the ground and walk all over it. And then the rest of the world keeps going on. And you're like, wait a minute, how is that possible? Grief is just talk about a transition.
Yeah,
that's a transition.
Sorry about your dad too. I mean, but I see your dad working through. It seems like that.
100%.
You feel like that? Like
I do. I've even had a good friend of mine who said, when I'm not a super religious person, but she said, I feel like your dad kind of wrote that with you. And that is what it felt like. Like I'm not a big fan of, even though I have become more, when I first read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic and her idea of the creativity and it's floating around and it grabs certain people. And I was like, whatever, this is so hokey. No freaking way. But that is this. I 100% believe that is this because this isn't new stuff. What I've finally realized is we're all kind of talking about similar things, all of us in this self-help personal development therapy world. It's just finding the person that says the thing and is teaching it the way that resonates with your history and your issues and what's happening with you that you're going to learn from and grow from. It's not that person has something figured out that others don't. It's that they're talking in a language that resonates with you. And so that has really helped me also professionally be like, oh, I don't have to have it all figured out. I just got to be honest and talk about my experience and the tools I've figured out that are helpful that may be helpful to other people.
The one thing I find interesting is you kind of had a before and after. You're a therapist, you're working with your clients. We got Kristen Neff's work, I did my Brene Brown training did you go to that one where she was there?
Yes. Yeah.
We were there at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we saw her speak at the camp, whatever camp Brene was putting on. It was, okay, so she's there and you're going, oh yes, self-compassion, you're teaching your clients. And then something shifted when your dad died.
Yes, exactly.
What was the shift exactly? What did you realize what shifted it?
I think it was I have done so many of these interviews and not one person has asked me that question, which is such a great question. As I buy myself time, no, it really is a great question. But I think it partly was my relationship with dad that it just broke my heart to see him struggling. And at the end of his life, he was really honest and authentic about how much he was struggling with that. I think it was just seeing that in myself and was like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of letting this thing, my monger, beat me up. And what's funny is when you say that's a before and after, and I see it knowing my story, because I talk about when I teach things, I teach them in spirals. And I think that was the first spiral, or one of the first spirals in unearthing my own family trauma, in unearthing my own anxiety, and unearthing my own self. So that to me now doesn't seem like that big of an aha, because I've had so many other spirals down into this process. So it's hard to think back on it. But it really was the first time I think that I thought, I don't have to live this way. This voice doesn't have to run the show. I just got to figure out how to do that self-loyalty thing, which I'm still trying to figure out.
The lifelong journey. I really am convinced. Like, there's not across the finish line, because then another shame piece will pop up, or
100%.
Another invitation for you to explore a different part that you thought was healed, but really it needs more nurturing. It needs more love. It needs more processing. When you say spiral, can you share what that means to you? Like you said, I've kind of understood this as a spiraling.
So that was the first. So if I go like top of the spiral was really figuring out this, my dad dying, me figuring out this Monger BFF thing, going on the book tour, and then owning that I had anxiety was kind of the next level, and being able to, even though I'd been in therapy for anxiety, I never really saw it in me. But then I saw it in me, the high functioning anxiety piece. And so then I started really talking about high functioning anxiety and went on this thing about self-loyalty. And a year ago, wrote a whole course on how to find self-loyalty, which does these spirals that I speak of. But it really wasn't until this past year then that, so I was kind of coasting along in this self-loyalty thing, doing the self-loyalty school, and I was going to really be helping people with that. And then my mom got sick. I turned 50 and I hurt my back, all kind of boom, boom, boom. And that is the spiral that I'm in right now. Let me back up a little bit. Before that spiral, I realized, and this is like, have not shared this on a public forum before, that I was raised by a narcissist. And so my mom was a narcissist, and she had raised me my entire life, enabled by my dad, and like bought that Kool-Aid until I was in my mid 40s, and finally saw that, wait, the red glasses that you had on viewing your family, it was more of a shit show than this beautiful thing you grew up with. So that was another transition of like, oh, we got all this trauma, and this is where the anxiety is coming from. And this is why you're such a perfectionist. And this is why you're pushing for worthiness so much, because you were told you were broken. And so then I'm unpacking all of that. And I also then just hit the wall of like, I can't function anymore. So in January, I just kind of collapsed on the couch for months. It wasn't until I would say like a month ago, that I finally came up for air and was like, okay, now it's just physical. I'm through the mental, emotional stuff. But that's when I really was like, wow, all this stuff that you've been learning, Nancy, was blocked because I couldn't look at my own upbringing and see what was really happening. And so that is the before and after. Not the writing of the book and not my dad dying, but this aha around my family of origin was the aha. And this aha of like, this is why you went into therapy, Nancy, to try to figure this out. And you've been doing all these things in your life that point with big red arrows. You had massive trauma in your childhood. And I'm like, oh, no, my childhood was great. It was great. Magical even. So anyway, that was just a load of, you wanted authenticity.
I love authenticity, and thank you for being so authentic and vulnerable and sharing real raw, because that is what resonates.
Yeah.
Because my nervous system goes, oh, there's like, my nervous system lets go when I feel authenticity. It just feels safe. I just like, oh, this feels so refreshing, because we can just be real, and it can be safe, and it can feel acceptable. Because growing up with narcissistic mother, there are unacceptable parts. I mean, there are judgments. There are so much that goes into it.
Yes. And here now my mom has dementia, and I am one of her primary caregivers. I mean, she lives by herself, but I'm still seeing her multiple times a week. So it's just, there's the thing you've been not wanting to look at, staring you in the face, and which has been helpful to be able to see all the ways that I was in denial, that she would say something that would ding me, that I just believed, that I just was like, yeah, right, okay. And now I can look at it and be like, what? That's not true. But I would just swallow it without even thinking. And all those became Monger messages. that I swallow.
Yes. And how much of that is the self-doubt? Like when I read
Yes.
how much
100%.
of that, right, is that self-doubt?
And here's
that
a great
creeps up.
example of how this works. So this morning, I told you Monger Monday, my husband and I have not been working because I hurt my back. And so I've kind of been on this, I've been very limited working because it's hard for me to sit up. Here I am. I'm going into all the excuses to justify to you why it's okay that I'm not working. Because this morning, my husband, who is an amazing husband, he loves me to death, said something so innocuous. And it was actually in his mind supportive because he said, well, it's not like your hands are broken. It's just your back. And so you can write as much as you wanted to. It's just that your back is broken. And my little monger took that and twisted it around as if my husband is the most evil, mean, malicious man that was like, God, you lazy fat ass. Here this whole time you've been whining about your back, but your hands are just fine. They're not broken. Why aren't you writing? And I took that and built it up and made it much bigger and more brutal and more mean for hours. And I knew what I was doing. I mean, part of me, that's not true. I didn't know what I was doing. But finally, when I recognized it, I said to him, wow, this is what I'm doing. And he's like, oh my God, I would never say that to you. Like for a long time, I think he thought, how could you possibly think I would say that stuff about you? But it didn't have anything to do with him. It doesn't have anything to do with him this morning. I said, that was a mom message that you said, and I took and spun it and heard it through her lens, and there you have it.
Bam. Does that feel so powerful, though, when you can figure that out?
Yes.
It's hard and it's painful, and yet there's an empowerment piece that goes, oh, this is why I spun it that way. This is why it made me feel this way.
Yes. Totally. But that's the part that I spent a lot of time in, that part of, like, finally this year, my husband said, you got to stop just identifying the monger. You need to start bringing in the biggest fan. My husband has obviously done this work with me, so he has all the lingo.
They all do, don't they? Like, welcome. Welcome to marrying a therapist. It's good.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to do this.
But he's right. And that's where I did a lot of times. For way too many years, I just analyzed what was happening, and then I would leave it there. Instead of being like, okay, now you got to do the thing that changes that belief and rewires it in a different way. That's the part I don't like doing. That's the part I just want to sit in analysis. But I've discovered that analysis isn't the whole gig.
It's a defense, because so you can sit in analysis for a long time.
Yes.
But it's almost like a protective part, because then I actually have to figure out, how do I caretake that part that feels so lazy and not worthy, bad, and now how do I take it to the next step of giving myself what I actually need, which is your part that's the biggest fan part.
So then that part, the acronym I have for bringing in the biggest fan is called ASK. And ASK stands for acknowledge what you're feeling, slow down and get into your body, and kindly pull back to see the big picture. This is why I'm saying none of that is brain surgery. You all know you're supposed to acknowledge what you're feeling. You're supposed to slow down and get into your body, and you're supposed to pull back and see a big picture. Like anything you follow, whether it's meditation or yoga or traditional therapy, is talking about this stuff. But for me, I was really bummed when I realized that I had to acknowledge my feelings, because I was really good at intellectualizing everything, because I'm really good at analyzing, which is why I got into therapy. I mean, to be a therapist, because I just wanted to analyze it so I could stop feeling this way and not have to go through the feelings part. But the feelings part, that's been the game changer. 100% acknowledging my feelings, because I had learned, again, I see this now after I had the aha about my family of origin, that feelings weren't okay unless you were happy. And I think so many of us got that message, especially Gen Xers, of be happy, because there was not time for our feelings. There was stuff happening all the time. And so that idea of, oh, I can acknowledge what I'm feeling and I don't have to do anything about it. I can just be sad. So like yesterday was Father's Day, which was a tough day because my dad, and I woke up in the morning and I immediately start analyzing what's going on. Why am I feeling this way? How can I feel better? And finally I thought, dude, it's Father's Day. Pass all day. We're not analyzing anything. Today we just get to feel whatever. And then I thought to myself, that's every day where you just get to feel whatever without having to analyze it and beat it to death. So then it is slowing down and getting into your body I always say a full body movement. Because for me, when I hear get into your body, I go, okay, I'm in my body, which that isn't in your body. So I have to force myself to stand up and reach and bend and move and do a little jig to really be like, oh yeah, you're not just a head here, you got a body. And that's really important. And so with clients, one thing I've noticed, and with myself, is that we're really good at saying, I'm feeling really sad. Today's such a tough day. I'm just so sad and angry. I'm so mad at my husband. But see, notice my voice is the same. There's no emotion there. I'm just reporting what I think the emotion should be. I'm not in it. And so when I'll say to my clients, go back, because I do audio recordings with my clients. And so I'll say, go back and listen to the recording and then record it again, but go into the emotion. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I was just dancing around it. And then I could take a deep breath. I can get into my body and I can be like, I am sad. I had a really bad argument with my spouse today. And just, hey, when that happens, the voice changes. Like what you said about that's authenticity. They're in the emotion. So it's exactly what you were saying. Then I can be like, okay, now we're making a connection. Now we got this. Because my nervous system relaxed. Because when they were like, I'm so sad, everything's so sad. And I'm like, okay, that's not matching. So you're not in it.
It's so interesting because I am so passionate about emotions and the key of health and processing them and allowing them out, which we didn't get as children, many of us.
Right.
And I remember as a child, my parents got divorced and my mom loved Barbra Streisand. So that was her love, was Barbra Streisand. And I would put on my record player and I'd put on Barbra Streisand, You Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore. I'm in 4th grade. I don't even, but it would allow me to feel. It would, I by myself.
Right. Okay.
I could then feel safe enough to connect to the emotion. Mm-hmm. So giving people that insight on, you might need a little music, you might need a song to help you. Because some people are like, I just don't feel anything. Or they're like, in their head with the feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I just did that the other day. I was like, I am feeling blah. The word just kept feeling blah, but I wasn't able to access the emotion. So I just put on some music. I actually got the Barbra Streisand, hadn't done that in years. Put it on and allowed the feelings, and there they were. If someone feels like I just can't access it, or I still am in my head, I can name it, but I can't feel it in my body. Just starting with maybe some music or whatever works for you, being out in nature, maybe it's your pets, looking at your pet's face.
Yeah.
Maybe you're petting, feeling whatever that is for you, to give you full permission, because a lot of us were conditioned out of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The full permission. I love that. I mean, all of what you said is, because it is true. It's accessing them is hard when you've been told it's not okay.
You feel bad. Like, I shouldn't feel this way because my life is okay right now. It's not that bad. You hear people say, well, I don't have it as bad as so-and-so.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a bad person because I feel sad today when everything should be happy.
Yes, exactly. I'll say that, like, my husband's around, oh, I should be happy. He's tired of having a crabby wife. He's tired. And I'm like, I know he's not. He's like, I'd rather have you be you. But that's another, like, it's okay to feel by myself this way, but I can't share it with anybody else. I can't bring it out into the world. And that's a whole nother level. I mean, that's another spiral, I think. Just being able to give myself permission to feel it in my own privacy has been huge.
Yes. I'm just noticing these 3, the monger, the BFF, and the biggest fan. And how are you accessing more of your biggest fan? How, when you're in the monger, are you accessing your biggest fan more?
Usually I will access her more by recognizing I'm with the monger. So that's the hardest part because it's so freaking comfortable. I always say comfortable. People are like, comfortable? But if you were raised with self-doubt as a primary motivation of how you did anything, it is comfortable. It's familiar. It's comfortable. You don't want it to be, but it is. And so initially when it happens, I describe it like this. You find a sweater at the back of your closet and you're like, I haven't seen this sweater in forever. And you put it on and you're like, yeah. And that's initially what the monger feels like, comfortable, familiar. And then she starts to get itchy. And she starts to feel like you get that, I'm a loser and I can't get out of it. And it's like a straitjacket. So the lovely sweater that you found at the back of the closet is like this straitjacket now. And so the earlier you can catch her, the better, because she's not so ingrained there. But a lot of times I will go direct out, I should say. The book says, practice ask. Acknowledge what you're feeling, slow down and get into your body, kindly pull back to see the big picture. But sometimes if she's really in there, I'll just be like, wait, you're in Monger world. This is Monger attack right now. Let's access 50-year-old Nancy. Where is she? And when I can pull out and do that age thing, for me, that's helpful because then I recognize, oh, you're acting as 14-year-old Nancy or 8-year-old Nancy. And I can remember what it feels like to be 50-year-old Nancy and to be like, you're not in that world anymore. You are an adult and you have a house with your husband and you guys have created a safe place and this is different. Then once I get there, I can start going into what's really going on here. And then it's, oh my gosh, this morning, oh my gosh, I'm afraid. What if when I start to go back to work, it's not there? What if I should have been doing more? Or I have these fears. And then I can address the fears because it's not about you're a loser who isn't working. It's about, wait a minute, you're an actual person. Now, I also want to say this. One of the ways I got to recognizing the 50-year-old Nancy is noticing. So like last week, I was supposed to contact a couple people and I was procrastinating on it. And at the end of the day, I was beating myself up. You're such a loser. You should have contacted these people, blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't feel like contacting them. It was just like, you're not in the mood. And I said that to myself, but it didn't help. But then the next day, I got up in the morning and I was in the mood and I just contacted everyone, bim, bam, boom, no big deal, checked all the boxes, everything was fine. And that's when I said to myself, see, today you were in biggest fan mode. Yesterday, you were in monger mode. See how that feels in your body. And I started paying attention to, oh, when I am in biggest fan mode, I don't have self-doubt. I'm not analyzing every little thing of what might they say and what might I say. I just am like, I'm a 50-year-old woman making a phone call for a doctor's appointment. This isn't going to be a big deal. But if my anxiety is in charge and my monger is in charge, I try to pay attention to how I feel in my body differently. And then I can pull myself out of it.
Okay, this is sparking a great conversation because I love inner child work and noticing how old do you feel and those things. Do you think that anxiety is a younger part?
Yes, I do. 100%.
And we've learned how to perform to manage the anxiety. That's what you're calling high functioning anxiety.
Yes, right. So all the things we do, perfectionism, people pleasing, go, 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 those are all ways, defenses, unhealthy coping skills we have developed around our anxiety.
Because if we weren't allowed to feel as kids, we develop anxiety, which is really kind of fear of not belonging, not getting the love we want, not feeling worthy, not feeling acceptable. So I will earn that so I belong and you love me and you think I'm enough.
Yes.
And I still have a connection with you. And so that anxiety just kind of follows along if we're not doing the feelings work.
100%. Yeah. Because I have to be able to say to my little 16-year-old, sweetie, you're not there. We're not there anymore. We're safe. I have you. Your 50-year-old self has you. We're out of that place. Now, what's really going on here? And I can get into it then.
So this is an interesting piece for people listening, is the body work. I want to go back to that piece because I think it's really important. When I feel anxious, this is an important question. Where do you notice it in your body? And I have this like pit in my stomach. It's some people might have their throat feels tight or their chest feels tight or they might have back pain, wherever it is. I can remember feeling that as a child. And I can go, oh, it's very familiar. Means at that moment, I wasn't able to process what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, what I was afraid of.
Right. Yes.
Was it going to be attended to? It wasn't going to be seen, noticed. So I just pushed through, put on a mask, however I did it, multitude throughout my childhood. But I invite people to say, is there a familiar body sensation? When you notice it in your body, you feel anxious, you've identified it, and kind of doing this kind of float back. I recommend doing it with a therapist to have that support. It's really powerful. That's why I love EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, can really help in somatic experiencing and all these different therapy modalities to help it move it up and out of the body. I'm also curious what your thoughts are on suppressed anger that's living in the body.
That's a lot. I mean, I think a lot of my clients have suppressed anger that comes out as anxiety, like that, the place. And one of almost all my clients share, and I'm not saying that everyone who has high functioning anxiety has this, but a tendency to cry when they're angry that is like pisses them off that they do that. But again, anger isn't okay, but crying is in their house of origin. And so that was what they learned. But then it was yelled at too. It was like this mixed message of girls can cry, but girls can't be angry. And so I definitely think suppressed anger. I know I deal with that big time.
Yeah, because a lot of times, or we weren't allowed to do that, or there was going to be a major price to pay.
Major price, yeah.
The other thing that I'm wondering what your thoughts are on is when somebody feels anxious, that it can come across as anger, that they feel anxious, but it comes across as anger or irritability. Do you find that?
I find that to be true, yes. And I will say one of the things I have to know if you are under a monger attack, as I call it, it's a 10 reaction to a 2 situation, where you come home and you told the kids to do the dishes and they didn't, but really you're feeling anxious about a presentation at work, but the dishes suddenly become the be-all end-all of how much they love you and how worthy they think you are, and you just scream about the dishes when that wasn't the problem. The problem is the thing at work that you're feeling anxious about. So 100%, I think a lot of marital conflicts is anxiety. Not a lot, but
I completely agree.
Emotion, it doesn't have to be anxiety. It's emotions that are misplaced. And I wanted to go back, 2 things I wanted to say. One thing I wanted to say was when it comes to the breathing or comes to the body, the thing that used to drive me freaking crazy, and this is why I say full body movement. I cannot stand the take a deep breath. Take 5 deep breaths, take a deep breath. I mean, like, I can still visualize me coming down the stairs, my husband being like, wow, you seem really anxious. Take a deep breath. And I just want to punch him in the face, because the last thing, someone with high functioning anxiety who's jumping from thing to thing, I do not want to pause. I do not want to get into my breath, into my body, because this feels too good. So the idea that taking a deep breath is going to have any influence on how I'm feeling it's not. And that's why I say get into your body. When I started this work, had absolutely no relationship with my body. None. Zippo. When you say to me, where'd you feel anxiety as a child? No clue. None. And so this has been a process of really having to get to know and have a lot of curiosity. And it does not come, for me, from breath. It has to come from me stretching and moving and being like, where do I feel this? And so I just think, again, it's that idea of find the people who are talking about things that resonate with you, that get you on the right path, and then you'll do that stuff, and then you'll be like, okay, I'm ready for something else. And you try that too. And I think I revisit now The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and I'm like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Because I couldn't see it in my 20s when I first started reading it. And so I think sometimes we're not ready for the lesson yet. And then we can get ready.
Yes. I like how you said for you, the breath that can be more activated. I mean, if someone's going to take a deep breath when you're in the middle of it, and that you need to get in your body by moving, stretching.
Yes.
That will calm your nervous system down.
Yes. Because that's what you got to think. Just so you said, it's all about how can I calm my nervous system down? Because there's 2 things that are happening. One, you're in an anxious state. So it's an acute. I got to get my nervous system calmed down in this moment. And that's why you'll see things about taking a deep breath or holding something cold or changing your state, because it's all things of how can I get out of this acute state of anxiety. But you also then need to be treating the chronic anxiety. And that's this idea of acknowledging what I'm feeling, doing the inner child stuff, creating the source of where this anxiety came from. And so CBT therapy is great for acute anxiety. How do I train my thoughts when I'm in an anxious state? But I also got to be doing some EMDR stuff, some deeper stuff, to really be getting at the root of my anxiety, because that's how I'm going to make some inroads into this stuff. It's still going to be there. I always say we're about quieting anxiety. It's not about curing it, because I don't think we can totally cure it, but we can get on top of it and be ahead of it so it doesn't run the show.
That's so important. If someone says, I don't really have anxiety, I'm not in a corner like shaking, or people think anxiety looks a certain way. Like, what are the tells? And I know we're almost out of time, but what are the tells for someone with high functioning anxiety?
Well, I will say this. Most of the time, the people that come to me, most of my clients come to me, either their spouse has contacted me first to kind of be like, hey, they gave me the heads up. They gave me permission that I could reach out to you. because it's hard with high functioning anxiety because it feels so good. Some of the symptoms that really bring people in is that anger piece. You can't relax. You can't ever calm down. You just are going, going, going. It is the ways you are using to numb yourself. Maybe your drinking is increased or your sugar intake is increased. All of those are ways that we deal with anxiety. It isn't, I say there's high functioning, meaning I hit anxiety and I push harder. I am a person that is a type A personality. I have everything figured out. I have to know the plan. I don't want to be sidestriked or out of control or have someone tell me what to do. Like all those things are common symptoms of people with high functioning anxiety. Then there is low functioning anxiety, which isn't, the term is seen as a negative because low functioning isn't as valued as high functioning by society. But they're both really unhealthy ways of coping in the world. Low functioning, I'm going to go hide in the corner and be really scared. I'm going to obsess about things with my family and I'm going to call them all the time and check on them. High functioning anxiety, I'm going to function harder and faster and higher in how I do stuff. I'm not going to hide from anxiety. I'm going to push through it.
Did
that answer that question?
Yeah, that did. And
Okay.
then what would you say are the 3 biggest takeaways in working through and tending to high functioning anxiety?
All about feelings. It's so much about feelings. And I hate that that's the truth. My 16-year-old is really mad that that's the truth. But it is all about feelings. I'm just going to give some things on feelings because it is the idea of what a big one for me on feelings was I don't have to act on the feeling. I can just be sad. I don't have to confront someone or talk to someone, or that may be something I need to do, but I don't have to. And so for me, like I could be angry and I don't have to do anything with it. Just acknowledging that you're angry about this was revolutionary for me because I could never even acknowledge it. So that's why the first step of ask is acknowledge your feelings. And so I think that is a big one for people to recognize. And then the third thing I think with high functioning anxiety that was a big takeaway for me, and this again goes back to feelings, is the idea there's so much out there about your thoughts control everything. And I just struggle with that so much. I do not believe that your thoughts control everything. Your feelings are running the show most of the time, and you are not even thinking about them. So I know that there are times where my sadness is running the show, and I am doing all these things, acting out of sadness. I'm not thinking about sadness. I'm not thinking about the thing that's making me sad. I'm not obsessing about it, but it's running the show. And that proves to me that feelings run the show. And so this idea of your thoughts control everything is just making everything worse.
I want to do like a mic drop. I want to go, boom, yes, that's it. This is the takeaway. I mean, these 2 points are so significant. How can people find your book, The Happier Approach, if they want to get it and they want to deconstruct these 3 parts and work with them?
They can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble through my website, nancyjanesmith.com. It's on Audible and Kindle, and you can get all the versions. And I've read by me in my little guest bedroom.
So glad. I like it when the author reads the book.
Yes. Oh, me too. So yeah, that's how you can find it. And my website has my podcast. There's just a lot of free information on my website.
And it's nancyjanesmith.com.
You got it. Yes.
That's where you go. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we covered. I feel like I just talked, but it's so much fun.
I love it. You're awesome. And I think this is going to be so helpful to many people. So share this and let's use this term more. Did you coin the term high functioning anxiety? No,
I did not. No.
I was going to say kudos to you because we're talking about that very much. And that
because the thing that sorry, I got all excited that I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
The last thing I want to say is that people sometimes will think, because it was around that high functioning anxiety means that I don't really have anxiety because I function so well with it, like it's a higher anxiety. That is not it. It is the same. All we've done is separated out the symptoms of anxiety and how they represent versus low functioning versus high functioning. But it's all anxiety. It doesn't mean you're better because you have high functioning anxiety versus someone that has low functioning anxiety. And I know there are articles out there that make it appear that way. And that is, in my view, very incorrect.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Thank you so much, Nancy, for your heart, sharing this work with our audience. I am so grateful for you. And everybody go get the book. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, DBoice, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.